look to the screens, we're going to sing 592. 592, Tell It to Jesus. We're gonna wait just a minute. 592, Tell It to Jesus. All right. Are you weary? Are you heavy-hearted? Tell it to Jesus. Tell it to Jesus. Are you grieving over joys departed? Tell it to Jesus alone. Tell it to Jesus. Tell it to Jesus. He is a friend that's well known. You've no other such a friend or brother. Tell it to Jesus alone. Do the tears flow down your cheeks unbidden? Tell it to Jesus. Tell it to Jesus. Have you sins that to men's eyes are hidden? Tell it to Jesus alone. Tell it to Jesus. Tell it to Jesus. He is a friend that's well known. You've no other such a friend or brother. Tell it to Jesus alone. Do you fear the gathering clouds of sorrow? Tell it to Jesus. Are you anxious? What shall be tomorrow? Tell it to Jesus alone. Tell it to Jesus. Tell it to Jesus. He is a friend that's well known. You've no other such a friend or brother. Tell it to Jesus alone. Are you troubled at the thought of dying? Tell it to Jesus. Tell it to Jesus. For Christ's coming kingdom are you sighing? Tell it to Jesus alone. Tell it to Jesus. Tell it to Jesus. He is a friend that's well known. You've no other such a friend or brother. Tell it to Jesus alone. Amen. You may be seated. Great singing. And let's see here. Announcements. Junior camp. Do it. Pretty much that's it. And senior camp. Pray. And that's what we need. Excited and looking forward to that. And so just pray for us. Pray for all the teens that will be there. And again, the counselors, the preachers, and everything. Just that nobody would get injured. Nobody would roll over a what did they do that one year? I shouldn't say this, but roll over a go-kart. Yeah, you don't want to do that and break your arm or things like that. So just pray for us. That'll be good. And let's see here. So what verse were we memorizing? Whoa, Miss Kitty. Titus 3:5.
Not by works of righteousness are ye, not by works of righteousness that ye have done, but according to his mercies we are saved, you are saved, and washing
Of regeneration.
Yes, regeneration and renewing of the Holy Ghost.
Good, amen. Give her a hand. Yeah, Titus 3:5. Not by works of righteousness which we have done, but according to his mercies he saved us by the washing, regeneration, and renewing of the Holy Ghost. Amen. Who else? Or Larry.
Titus 3:5.
Good.
Not by works of righteousness which we have done, but by his mercy. But according to his mercy he saved us through the washing of regeneration and the renewing of the Holy Ghost.
Amen. Amen. It's good. So not only is it not of works, right? It's nothing that we can do, but it's according to his Spirit and the renewal, regeneration that he does within us. Amen. Makes us a new creature, right? 2 Corinthians 5:17. Anybody else? like a staff person, maybe. Or like, Brother Nick. Brother Nick, whoa, hey.
That is 35. Not by works of righteousness which we have done, but according to his mercy he saved us by the washing of regeneration and the renewing of the Holy Ghost.
Amen, amen, good. I knew you were wondering, but he actually does memorize it. Good, amen. And pastor's wife, hey. Yeah.
You start for me?
Yeah. Not.
Not by works of righteousness that we have done, but according to his mercies he saved us by the washing of regeneration
Washing of regeneration
and the renewing of the Holy Ghost.
Good, amen, amen. Hey, Jeff.
Titus 3:5. Not by works of righteousness which we have done, but according to his mercy he saved us by the washing of regeneration and by the renewing of the Holy Ghost.
Good, amen, amen.
R&R.
R&R. I love Brother Jeff's cadence. Titus 3:5. It's like, and then he's just kind of, yeah, just goes. All right, anybody else? Anybody else? Titus 3:5. Ba, 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 ba. Okay, so here's what I said we were going to do. We're not getting a new verse for this week. We're going to have like the pop quiz. I know. Next week. The pop quiz is like, hey, let's go through some verses that we've memorized. Yeah, like John 1:1-3, John 14:6, right? Romans 3:10, right? Romans 3:23, 6:23, all that. Romans 10:9 and 10. That's a good question.
Or do you have, are you going to stand up there and say?
I haven't quite decided.
We should just do it
A
as
Scantron.
like Bible verse Jeopardy.
Oh,
What is Romans whatever, and then
Romans
have the
5:8.
have the points.
no, like you put the thing or half of it. Finish this verse.
Finish this. What is? Joni.
Are you sending out an email list of all the verses?
I should do that, shouldn't I? That would be nice.
Katie has a list.
Kitty does have a list. Okay. Yeah. See me after class. You always want to make friends with the students who take the notes, right? So then you can just get a copy of theirs. Yes, we'll do that. And look, it's just not for spiritual brownie points, right, or anything else. It's good to memorize God's word, and it's good to provoke one another unto good works, right? Which is why we're supposed to assemble together. Hebrews 10:24. What was that? Okay, nice. I'm not sure whether that's part of the provoking or the good works, the chocolate. I'm not sure. Okay, why don't we go ahead? We're going to stand one more time. Let's actually, let's go ahead and take the offering. Let's just do that now, and then we'll sing 2 hymns after that. We're flexible, right? We'll take the offering, and I know I always, it's like the piano players have to like, what are we doing? I'm sorry. And let's just go ahead and pray now for the offering. Lord, thank you so much for an opportunity to be in your house. And Lord, thank you for your word. Thank you for the opportunity to memorize it and hide it in our hearts and the work that it does in us, Lord. And I thank you for that renewing and regeneration that your Holy Spirit does, Lord. And I continue to need that. I continue to need you to change me and mold me. And I'm thankful for that. Lord, I pray that you would receive the offering now and you'd bless it. And we ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. All right, let's go ahead and stand. We're going to turn to 536, In My Heart. 536. In my heart there rings a melody. I have a song that Jesus gave me. It was sent from heaven above. There never was a sweeter melody. 'Tis a melody of love. In my heart there rings a melody. There rings a melody with heaven's harmony. In my heart there rings a melody. There rings a melody of love. I love the Christ who died on Calvary, for he washed my sins away. He put within my heart a melody, and I know it's there to stay. In my heart there rings a melody. There rings a melody with heaven's harmony. In my heart there rings a melody. There rings a melody of love. 'Twill be my endless theme in glory. With the angels I will sing. 'Twill be a song with glorious harmony when the chords of heaven ring. In my heart there rings a melody. There rings a melody with heaven's harmony. In my heart there rings a melody. There rings a melody of love. Amen. Let's turn over to hymn number 2. How Great Thou Art. Hymn number 2. O Lord my God, when I in awesome wonder consider all the worlds thy hands have made, I see the stars, hear the rolling thunder, thy power throughout the universe displayed. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. When through the woods and forest glades I wander and hear the birds sing sweetly great singing. You may be seated. It's good to sing of God's greatness. And He is great. And it's just wonderful to be here at church and appreciate that fact and worship Him and hear from His Word. So now we're going to do that. Brother Nick, why don't you come and preach?
All right, once again, turn in your Bibles to Judges chapter 9. Judges chapter 9. We'll be starting in verse 7. It's been a good day. I don't know how else to say it, but it's just been a good day. It's always good to be in church, and I'm excited for what God's going to do this week with the teens. It's just been a good day. And so tonight, as we start in Judges chapter 9, we'll be in verse 7. And then we'll just dive right into the text tonight. So Judges chapter 9, verse 7. And when they told it to Jotham, which is the story of his brothers, all 69 of his brothers getting killed by Abimelech. And when they told it to Jotham, he went and stood in the top of Mount Gerizim, and lifted up his voice, and cried, and said unto them, Hearken unto me, ye men of Shechem, that God may hearken unto you. The trees went forth on a time to anoint a king over them. And they said unto the olive tree, Reign thou over us. But the olive tree said unto them, Shall I leave my fatness, wherewith by me they honor God and man, and go to be promoted over the trees? And the tree said to the fig tree, Come thou and reign over us. But the fig tree said unto them, Should I forsake my sweetness and my good fruit, and go to be promoted over the trees? Then said the trees unto the vine, Come thou and reign over us. And the vine said unto them, Should I leave my wine, which cheereth God and man, and go to be promoted over the trees? Then said all the trees unto the bramble, Come thou and reign over us. And the bramble said unto the trees, If in truth ye anoint me king over you, then come and put your trust in my shadow. And if not, let fire come out of the bramble, and devour the cedars of Lebanon. Now therefore, now that he's done with the story, now therefore, if ye have done truly and sincerely, in that ye have made Abimelech king, and if ye have dealt well with Jerubbaal and his house, and have done unto him according to the deserving of his hands, for my father fought for you, and adventured his life far, and delivered you out of the hands of Midian, and ye are risen up against my father's house this day, and have slain his sons, 70 persons upon one stone, and have made Abimelech, the son of his maidservant, king over men of Shechem, because he is your brother. If ye then have dealt truly and sincerely with Jerubbaal, and with his house this day, then rejoice ye in Abimelech, and let him also rejoice in you. But if not, let fire come out from Abimelech, and devour the men of Shechem, and the house of Millo, and let fire come out from the men of Shechem, and from the house of Millo, and devour Abimelech. And Jotham ran away, and fled, and went to Beer, and dwelt there for fear of Abimelech his brother. So this is a fun little thing. It's kind of a confusing story at first, but we'll see the meaning of it in just a moment. But I'm going to pray one more time before we get into the message tonight. Dear Lord, thank you for this day, and just thank you for just the refreshing I got today out of your word, and just Lord, just the reminder that we need to love our brothers and sisters enough to watch ourselves. And Lord, I just thank you for that. And Lord, I just pray that tonight as I preach, Lord, that you would guide my words, and that you would use me in a way only you can, Lord. And I just pray that you'd be with us tonight and help us. In Jesus' name, amen. Now, how many of you know what a fable is? Fable. Fables are fun. I actually have with me my copy of Aesop's Illustrated Fables because they're just good. And now the meaning of fables throughout history has been use a small story to tell a certain moral truth. And you use it in a way that it's a literary form to pull out a moral that you want in a story. For example, I have two flagged here that I'm going to read tonight, if I can get to my bookmarks. So, The Peasant and the Apple Tree. A peasant had in his garden an apple tree which bore no fruit, but only served as a harbor for the sparrows and grasshoppers. He resolved to cut it down, and taking his axe in his hand, made a bold stroke at its roots. The grasshoppers and sparrows entreated him not to cut down the tree that sheltered them, but to spare it, and they would sing to him and lighten his labors. He paid no attention to their requests, but gave the tree a second and third blow with his axe. When he reached the hollow of the tree, he found a hive full of honey. Greatly delighted, he threw down his axe, and thereafter took great care of the tree. And the moral on the bottom, self-interest alone moves some men. Self-interest alone moves some men. And then the one that I like that I picked for today, the goat and the vine. A goat was straying in a vineyard and began to browse on the tender shoots of a vine, which bore several fine bunches of grapes. "What have I done to you," said the vine, "that you should harm me thus? Isn't there grass enough for you to feed on? All the same, even if you eat up every leaf I have and leave me quite bare, I shall produce wine enough to pour over you when you are led to the altar to be sacrificed." Ill treatment invites retribution. And that's the truth that it pulls out in that. And so as fables, as we look at fables, they're funny little stories. Sometimes they have little funny little things that happen in them, and like the trees that give a stick to a man because he's in need of a stick, and he uses the stick to make a handle for his axe and then cuts down all the trees. There's many different weird, funny, sometimes tragic parables, but right now as we're getting into our passage, Jotham uses just that, a parable, to tell a story to the men of Shechem to kind of foretell something that he sees happening in the future. So let's dig into the text tonight in verse 7. "And when they told it to Jotham, when they told him about the horrific slaughter of his brothers, he went and stood in the top of Mount Gerizim." Now they said the way that it's positioned, it was a hill and a mountain on top looking over Shechem, and when he'd preach out or when he'd speak out, it was like the whole entire plain of Shechem, all the people in Shechem could hear him. So as he gets up there and he starts proclaiming this. He lifted up his voice and cried and said unto them, "Hearken unto me," or "Listen to me, men of Shechem, that God may listen unto you. Hearken unto me, that God may hearken unto you." So he's got a message for them that he brings for them. So he then begins his parable in verses 8 through 15. So he starts off and we see a bunch of different trees here. So it says, "The trees went forth on a time to anoint a king over them." So it's drawing the parallel that all the trees go out and they say, "We're going to anoint ourselves a king." And so they go and they approach the olive tree. Now, the trees that they use here are what would be the most significant trees of that time, the olive tree. So we're at the olive tree. This is where they would get their oils. This was a great source. If you had an olive tree, it was a great source of wealth in those days to have olive. And funny enough, the oil made from the olive tree would be what would anoint the kings in it. And so they went to the olive tree, but the olive tree said to them, "Should I leave my fatness or should I leave my fullness, my purpose here, wherewith by me they honor God and man, to go and be promoted over the trees?" He's saying, I am the one that anoints the king, and should I leave my purpose to be promoted over the trees? And so they move on and they go to the fig tree. Now the fig trees, they would use the figs as a sweetener, a natural sweetener, and they would also use it to make cakes and all sorts of breads and cakes and things like that. And so they go to the fig tree and they say, "Come thou and reign over us." But he said, "Should I forsake my sweetness and my good fruit and go to be promoted over the trees?" So that doesn't work. So first they go to the olive tree, then they go to the fig tree, and neither one works. So then they go to a third tree. They go to the vine, and they say, "Come thou and reign over us." And the vine said, "Should I leave my wine," or the way that it's interpreted, new wine, the grape juice, if you will, "should I leave my wine, which cheereth God and man, and go to be promoted over the trees?" So after the three most significant trees, if you will, or some of their most significant growth, if you will, of plants, after the three significant ones, they now go to the bramble bush, which is kind of odd because they go from three that produce a lot and when they talk about lording over us, it's like a shelter over. So you think of it as their leaves would be sheltering over the rest of the trees in a way. And now they go to the bramble bush. So what does it say about the bramble bush in verse 14? Then said they unto the bramble, Come thou and reign over us. And the bramble said unto the trees, If in truth ye anoint me king over you, then come and put your trust in my shadow. And the funny thing about that is, bramble bushes are full of thorns. There is no shadow. They have no cover. There is nothing there. There's nothing to protect them with. He says, if in truth ye anoint me king over you, then come and put your trust in my shadow. And if not, let fire come out of the bramble and devour the cedars of Lebanon. So the bramble, what's believed is when it says cedars of Lebanon, that was the trees that it referenced back in verse 8. The trees that went out were the cedars of Lebanon. So the cedars of Lebanon, it wasn't just that he would devour any trees. It was he was going to devour the greatest tree that they knew in that time. The cedars of Lebanon were looked at as majestic, awesome trees that were like impossible to chop down. They didn't want to chop them down because they were such ginormous trees. And so he's saying, I'm not just going to devour any tree with the fire, but the cedars of Lebanon, the biggest trees you can think of. And so after he gets done with this fable where he says, they went to separate trees and they all said no because they had different interests. But then they went to the bramble and the bramble said, you know what? If you trust in me, put your trust in my shadow, but if not, be devoured by the flame. So after he finishes his parable of these trees, he gives the reason for the parable, the moral, if you will. Now therefore, if ye have done truly and sincerely, and that ye have made Abimelech king, and if ye have dealt well with Jerubbaal and his house, and have done unto him according to the deserving of his hands. So he's saying, if you've done truly and sincerely, if you've done right in making Abimelech your king, everything's good. Everything's good because you've done right in doing that. If you were truthful and you were right in doing that, and if you've dealt well with Jerubbaal, which is, who's Jerubbaal? Kids. Pop quiz, who's Jerubbaal? Gideon, good job, good job. They're the same person. So if you've dealt well with Gideon and Gideon's house, then everything's okay. And he says the reason why he does it, and in verse 17 and 18, they say that he kind of goes off. It's not that he breaks thought, but he's giving validity for what his father did for the land. Because if you remember, the Midianites weren't just oppressing the Israelites. They were greatly oppressing the Israelites. But it was the whole land that was suffering for their sake because of the Midianites. And so when the Midianites came in, they were even terrorizing the men of Shechem. And so when Gideon drives them out, he even saves the men of Shechem. He saves them and their crops and those things. And so he says in verse 17, this is the reason why the house of Jerubbaal and his house, why you have to have done well according to him, because my father fought for you and adventured his life far and delivered you out of the hand of Midian. And ye are risen up against my father's house this day, and have slain his sons, 70 persons upon one stone. So it turns from a question of, if you've done well, then it's okay. It turns from that to, you know what you've done? You know what you've really done? And they're saying that this is the lament of Jotham, if you will. You have risen up against my father's house this day and slain his sons, 70 persons upon one stone, and have made Abimelech, the son of his maidservant, king over the men of Shechem. That was kind of a slam to Abimelech, the son of his maidservant. He isn't even a rightful son or rightful heir, if you will. You've made the son of his maidservant king over the men of Shechem because he is your brother. And then he goes back and he says, if then ye have dealt truly and sincerely with Jerubbaal and with his house this day, then rejoice ye in Abimelech, and let him also rejoice in you. So the idea is if you've done right in making Abimelech your king, if this is a right thing, if he's a rightful ruler, if he lines up the way that a ruler should, and if he's leading you the way he should, then you're okay. And if you've done right in the sight of God towards Gideon and towards Gideon's families, then you're okay. Then you should rejoice. But if not, in verse 20, let fire come out from Abimelech, just like the bramble bush. Let fire come out from Abimelech and devour the men of Shechem and the house of Millo. And let fire come out from the men of Shechem and from the house of Millo and devour Abimelech. So the idea is that they're going to devour each other. They're going to come to a fight, and they're going to end up fighting against each other. And Jotham ran away and fled and went to Beer and dwelt there for fear of Abimelech his brother. So after he gets done with his whole speech and with his whole thing about he's calling into question the authority of Abimelech, he's saying, you have brought over you, if you look at the way that he framed the parable, it's as if he's saying Abimelech is the least likely out of anyone to rule, and you put him in charge. This brash man that is only going to bring about pain to you, you put him in charge. And then he runs and hides. And then he runs and he goes and he flees for his life for fear of his brother. Well then, in verses 22 and 23, we see something that God begins to do with the men of Shechem and Abimelech. It says in verse 22, when Abimelech had reigned 3 years over Israel, then God sent an evil spirit between Abimelech and the men of Shechem, and the men of Shechem dealt treacherously with Abimelech. So that fire that Jotham was talking about, it now begins to creep out. They go against Abimelech, and then Abimelech, the evil spirit that the Lord puts in there, rests in both Abimelech and the men of Shechem, and they begin to come up against each other. And here's the reason why God did it, and here's the whole reason Jotham's parable and this whole portion of Scripture, verse 24. That the cruelty done to the 70 sons of Jerubbaal might come, and their blood be laid upon Abimelech, their brother, which slew them, and upon the men of Shechem, which aided him in killing of his brethren. So in our small mini-series that we have here going on pride and the consequences of pride, the consequences of this are pretty simple. The pride of man, or the pride that comes from man, instigates. Because what he did last week, that atrocity, that horrible thing that he did to gain his power, is what ultimately causes this evil spirit to come up between him and the men of Shechem. And when Jotham gets up and cries this, they say they don't know why. There's no symbol, or there's no, other than him saying, hearken unto me that God may hearken unto you. There's nothing signifying that this message of his was from God. It seems like a man just getting up and venting out before the men of Shechem saying, your king is worthless, and what you've done to the sons of Gideon, will come back upon you, and you'll both devour each other. So as he says, God begins to work this spirit amongst Abimelech and the men of Shechem, and it goes from here, and then it just starts to spiral out of control. And they really go on to a war between Shechem and Abimelech, and then Abimelech just goes off on everybody he comes in contact with. So this was retribution of God for the horrible slaughter of Gideon's son. At times, the pride of man instigates retribution from God. Gideon's actions in the past led to God pulling his hand off of his life, and God brought retribution for what Gideon had done wrong by giving Gideon exactly what he wanted, and that was total Canaanization, and that was a complete removal of God's hand off of his life. Abimelech and Shechem being at odds were retribution for his horrid slaughter of his brothers, and the part that Shechem played in that slaughter of his brothers. So in applying this to us, I wanted to go back and define pride one time from Webster's dictionary, because I know I had a couple questions about what exactly pride was from a couple different people. So the way that pride is defined in the Webster's dictionary is inordinate self-esteem an unreasonable conceit of one's own superiority in talents, beauty, wealth, accomplishments, rank, or elevation in office, which manifests itself in lofty airs, distance, reserve, and often in contempt of others. So basically, it's the lifting up of yourself to the point to where you look down on everybody else. That's what pride is. It's lifting yourself up and putting everybody else down. In relation to God, it's us lifting ourselves above what God is in our lives. It's us lifting ourselves above God. So when we look at this passage and when we look at what's going on in Abimelech's life, pride at times can lead us to do some things that we ought not to. And I remember a story from when I was little, and it was one of those things where we were a bunch of neighborhood kids out playing around, and we were playing baseball. That's what it was. We were playing baseball, and I was out there, and we were just messing around, playing around. Well, then there's this one kid kind of off in the distance. He's that classic kid that just isn't paying attention at all. He's just kind of got his head off in the clouds. And so us as a group of kids, we're all standing there, and it started to get to one of those contest things where it's like one of the kids was like, I bet he wouldn't know if like something hit him right in the head. And then one kid's like, well, I bet I could hit him. I bet I could hit him. Da, da, da. All this other stuff. And in my pride and in my arrogance of my abilities, I was like, I bet I could hit him. And without even thinking, I just whipped the ball. Nailed the kid right in the gut. Now instantly, I was like, oh, that was not good. Especially because the next door neighbor was watching and realized that intentionally I was throwing the ball at him knowing that he was not going to respond to it, in essence, intentionally hurting him. Now that's just a small story, but how often do we take actions in our own lives that are just, you know what, I'm superior. I'm superior in this, I'm superior in this, and we do something to harm somebody else. We do something to hurt somebody else or to shame them or to make them look like less so that we can lift ourselves up a little bit. That's the essence of pride that Abimelech was saying. He came forth and he did this for power, and he said, you know what? I don't care about my father. I don't care about his sons. I want power. I want to be lifted up above everybody else. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to eliminate any threat to my power, to the way that I want to live. I'm going to eliminate that to lift myself up. And when he does that, he brings in Shechem with him, and they go out together to defeat Gideon's sons. And it caused him to do something. And what Jotham simply got up and said was, you know, in life, there are times that when we do wrong things, the retribution of God is just a natural consequence of our pride. When we are lifted up in pride to the extent that we wrong someone, we got to expect and we got to realize in our minds that a natural consequence of wronging others is retribution. Retribution from God. It's the concept of sowing and reaping. We see it all throughout the Bible. It's whatever you sow, that will you reap. You want to go out and you want to do this horrible thing? If we go out in society, you can't just go out and murder someone for no reason and not expect there to be some sort of retribution in the law. It's a law of life, but so much more than that, it's a law of God. When we are lifted up in pride to the extent that we wrong someone, we should expect retribution from God. So what is another natural consequence of pride? Godly retribution. And from here, the retribution gets more and more intense. More and more intense. After this point, we've gone through the other couple, but now when we get to this one, he gets a little bit of retribution from God, and then we're going to see next the judgment of God comes down upon Abimelech hard. So tonight, it's very simple. It's a very simple truth found in God's word, and it was cool to me that God used Jotham to tell a parable that it's the only parable in the book of Judges. It's a unique passage. But the simple truth is this. The pride of man instigates retribution from God. And when our actions, when we are lifted up in pride to the extent that we wrong someone or we sin against somebody, we should expect the retribution from God. So has there been any times in your life where you can think about that? I know there have been so many times when I either get the pride issue brought up to me, and I get a flashback of that time, and as soon as that ball left my hand, I was like, I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have done that. And it was just because I was being cocky and because I wanted to show off. But has there been areas in your life where you've sinned against someone just to make yourself look good? Because that's ultimately what we see from this passage. Now, God is gracious and God is amazing, and every single time we go to Him, He will forgive us. And it may take us at times going to that same person that we wronged and saying, listen, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I've asked forgiveness from God. Can you forgive me? So the truth that we want to pull out of this tonight is that when we do something that sins against somebody else, when we're lifted up in our own pride to the extent that we sin against somebody else, we should expect retribution from God. But that does not mean you cannot be forgiven. That does not mean you cannot be forgiven. I'm going to pray tonight, and then we'll close it down. And Lord, I just thank you for what you've done in my life, and I just thank you for the passage and the simple truth, Lord. And it's a somber truth, and it's a very real truth, Lord. But it's something that we need to take to heart, Lord. And I just pray that you'll help us to realize ways that we can avoid this in our lives, and just, Lord, I just pray that you'd be with us this week. And I just pray that you'd help us tonight. In Jesus' name, amen. I'll give you a moment to respond. Day, and just thank you for what you've done in us today. And I just pray that you keep us all safe as we go home tonight, and give us safe travels wherever we go, and be with the teens tomorrow as they set out for camp, Lord, and just do a great work in their lives this week, Lord. We love them, so keep them safe, Lord, and we love you, and pray that you'll be with us this week. In Jesus' name, amen.